Hello and good morning from Chicago. My name is Richard Miller, Never Not Here on the air, and we're in a global discussion basically, and we're doing it 3 at a time for the last few weeks. And I guess everything that I want to say will come out in this discussion. So let's just say hi to Christine Wishke. Hi, Christine.
Hi, Richard.
Nice to see you again. Thanks for having this idea.
Nice to see you again.
Yeah.
Gina's one of my favorite people. So.
All right, let's just say hi to Gina then. Hi. Hi, Gina.
Hi, Richard. Hi, Christine. So great to be here.
Gina Lake.
Yes.
From the deserts, the high deserts, right?
Yes, beautiful Sedona.
So here we are. We're expressing, you know, there's a teaching that's been taught for a long time, and in many forms, actually. And we've come together to talk about it, and it seems like that's, you know, some people, their life is devoted to talking about a life experience, and somehow, sometimes we talk about it as an expression of using a kind of like the channel of a teaching to talk about it. And maybe that's a good way to talk about it, and maybe it isn't. I don't know. A lot of people, I guess, thought it was. And we're talking with 2 women who are friends. And so friends, like, generally we pick our friends by who agrees with us, right? So anyhow, I don't know, we're in total agreement that this teaching is something that we want to talk about, right? And this is the way to do it. I don't know, what about that, Gina? Is this the way to do it?
Sounds good to me. I think technology is meant for this kind of thing. It's really wonderful.
You kind of get where I'm coming from? Because like we're taking a certain kind of an angle at expressing an experience. And maybe that angle is totally arbitrary. You know, it's like our history and what we're used to, but we don't have a real clue if that's the best way to say it or express it. Maybe, you know, people talk about sharing beyond words also, so then we're not doing that too much.
Well, Richard, isn't the beauty of it that we all have our own unique angle on expressing whatever we're expressing, not even just the truth? And that's what makes life fun, is that we're all expressing our own little twist on things, and there is no one truth or one specific way of expressing it that is better than another way, perhaps, or the right way. And that's what's so exciting about being able to come together with so many voices on the internet and in this way on video, is you get to speak with other people who see things the way you do, but they use a little bit different language. And it's interesting. It's interesting for us as people who speak about it, and it can be interesting for listeners to see how the same thing, which can't really be put very well in words, is talked about slightly differently by various people. And in fact, we had to create our own language. Those of us who are talking about the truth have been creating language for doing this for, I would say, decades. It's probably millennia, really, but it seems to me that it's only been the last couple decades that we've even begun to be able to put into words what we're becoming very articulate about right now at this time, because we didn't have the words before to be very articulate about it. And I'm really excited about that, because I think the language had to develop first before we could really move forward quickly in this awakening. It seems to be part of it. How's that for a start?
That's kind of what I was thinking, you know, that we each have our own angle, our own particular angle in it, but somehow there's a big temptation to fit that angle into a form that's agreed upon.
Yes, there is a lot of pressure, isn't there, to talk a certain way, to talk about the truth in a certain way. People are out there examining what you're saying to see if you are the true teacher or if you've got the truth.
I don't know about pressure. It could be pressure, but maybe I'd call it expectation. What do you think, Christine?
Yeah.
I see a lot of that. A lot of so you have an example like Ramana Maharshi or Nisargadatta, and one of the sages, one of the masters, and people looking to that almost as a role model and trying to squish yourself into this image of what it means to be awake or what it means to be enlightened. And I think for me it's that, almost the opposite of that. It's the letting go of all molds and and just letting yourself emerge as you are in your particular uniqueness. So if awakening was supposed to look like all of the ways that the masters say in the past, then we would all be walking around talking like Nisargadatta. We would all be like Nisargadatta.
Wearing loincloths, right?
Yeah. And
no, you guys can wear saris.
That's right. I don't know if I'd ever wear a loincloth.
Somebody posted on one of my YouTube channels under one of the video, and I imagine it's a he, but I may be wrong, but maybe he quoted Nisargadatta, but he said something about how there's no room in the truth for politics, or there's no need for it, or I don't know what he said. So it was kind of like an idea that
if truth is priceless, then there has to be room for anything.
That things only look a certain way, right?
Right, and it's really, for me, I'd like to have it be no molds spirituality, no rules, to just have your own unique expression emerge naturally, however it wants to. And to me, it's more exciting that way, to hear the expression of Gina and her total uniqueness, and the expression of Richard and the expression of Christine, and to have us just express our naturalness. So it's sort of like the way that I see it, it's like snowflakes. They are all snow, so maybe we are all saying the same essential message, but each snowflake has its unique form, a unique shape. So each time somebody speaks about truth, it's going to come through from the angle of their particular uniqueness. And in that way, everybody has value in their uniqueness.
Yes, and I think that is part of the truth, that we are unique. It's not separate from the truth that we are unique. The truth, the oneness, divides this diversity on purpose. I think we have to conclude that, because if there's only oneness, then whatever's showing up in oneness was created by oneness, right? And there's obviously uniqueness and diversity in the creation. And so the oneness must have, in a sense, chosen that or created that in that way. And so it's meant to be that way. There's meant to be that diversity, that uniqueness, and that all-inclusiveness, because the oneness includes everything, everyone. So, it's kind of a funny thing to think that something is not included in the truth. That doesn't sound like the truth to me.
Yeah, like where's the outside of oneness that we're going to put it?
Yeah.
Well, in one way, we're trying to discover what's real, right? And some people testify that that's oneness. But in a way, to discover something, don't we need to start just here now? Maybe even start with no expectations. So if we say, well, if everything was created by oneness, then why would it be any different? Why would there be no room? Blah blah blah. I mean, that would be starting from an expectation, right? And then why don't we just start from a black hole and see if oneness comes out of it? Or how do you like that idea?
Well, sure. If you haven't had an experience of oneness, if you don't know that in your bones because you haven't experience that life is oneness, then just to talk about it in that way just makes it another belief. So yes, it's better to strip down all beliefs, even a belief in oneness, if you haven't had an experience of oneness. And then from that stripping down, it prepares the ground or the environment for you to experience oneness more easily.
Well, to discover it, maybe, huh? Because
to discover it.
Yeah, okay, somebody's experienced. Let's say, let's just keep using those words because we're just using them. We're not trying to adopt them and say they're great words or they're. But we'll just say, let's say 5 people have experienced oneness and they could really get it, what we're saying, But I would say like 995 haven't, and they're just trying to figure this out, and it's new for them. And so then when anything's new, we give it to them as we point to it with words, and words are concepts. And so then they're wrestling with this concept. And so I want to talk to those 900 people more than those 5, because those 5 will get it anyhow, They could get lost for all I care,
I really feel that talking about oneness and your experience of oneness, although it has a place, I don't think that is the way to bring people to the oneness, to the experience of oneness. Just hearing someone's description of it is not the teaching.
It's frustrating, isn't it? It seems to be frustrating for those guys, right?
For people who haven't experienced, to hear other people describe it, there's a disconnect, and they go away with beliefs or ideas about oneness, and there's still may not be a sense of it. Of course, many of the people who talk about oneness also transmit that in their presence, and that's much more valuable, and that might really be the teaching, and the words talking about oneness are not really the important part of their teaching. So if someone is transmitting that oneness as they're speaking about it, then of course that is a valuable teaching. I prefer to try to meet people where they're at and discover what their misunderstandings or their beliefs are that are preventing them from just dropping into this simple present moment where it is possible for anyone to experience oneness. You don't have to have an awakening to experience oneness. You just have to be still. You just have to listen and be present in the moment, and you'll have an experience to some degree of what we're talking about.
Yeah, that's really what I find too. For me, it seems to be the more that I drop resistance, the more presence is available. And so when I meet somebody, it's the same as what Gina said. It's just meeting them where they're at and dropping resistance. And so then presence can kind of come through and meet that person wherever they are. And also, I think the whole discovery of oneness or awakening or whatever you want to call it, it's a process, or at least for me, it's been a process of discovery, and it deepens and deepens and deepens over time. And I think, like what Gina was describing about meeting the person where they're at, it's like if enlightenment is a mountain and you're climbing up to the top. I think there's 2 approaches to helping a person who is on that climb. And the one approach would be to sit up at the top of the mountain and point out what it's like up there, and help encourage the person to get up to that point that you're describing. And the other approach is to walk down to where they are and stand with them exactly where they are. And you have to be a little bit more willing to get your hands dirty in the second approach, but to walk down to where they are, even if that's deep suffering, and just walk them step by step to the top of the mountain, and then they just see for themselves. This is the vantage point you're talking about.
We can look at that process as as something that you look back on and you say, oh, I see that it was kind of just unfolding little by little. Or we can look at it now and maybe now we don't really see that it's unfolding. We're just focusing on all the stuckness that seems the sameness in our life, and then we probably have an idea that it's going to look different, it's going to be different than this. And so this is, and then, so then we're, well, that's resistance too, but we're in denial. We deny that any progress has been made because these certain facets of my life appear again and again and again. And of course, they wouldn't be here if I was at all awakening or at all, you know. But I mean, can a process also be kind of a gradual softening of your life and a gradual, I mean, seeing that that love is more important, for instance, than holding, that letting things in is more important than holding things out, maybe, you know, that somehow the barriers of my individual self soften? I mean, do these things actually appear as a process while you're going through it, or is it only something you can retrospectively say that, yeah, that's how it was?
I think you go ahead, Gina.
I do think it's difficult for people to realize the growth or the process while they're in the midst of it, and at a certain point, when they're down the road a bit from it, it becomes obvious and apparent, and then they can even teach somebody else about it because they've gone through it. But when you're in the midst of it, you often need somebody else who's been there to point it out that you're in a process, or that you are growing in a certain way. I just think that's the role of a counselor, and that was certainly the role that I felt I played with people, is that just giving them the bigger picture of what their experience fits into when they're not capable of seeing the big picture just yet. And people feel very inspired and relaxed when someone else can point out that they are in the midst of a process but can't really understand that until they're out, but it'll be fine. And so then they relax and just let the process happen. But it's just natural to not be able to talk about what you're learning or how you're developing spiritually at certain points in that process. Maybe we're not meant to be able to speak about it. And is that, what were you going to say, Christine?
Just that for me personally, there have been moments that I've noticed that it was a process. And usually, like you say, it was when somebody was, you know, a counselor figure or a teacher figure or a guide figure in my life was pointing it out to me. But for the most part, when I'm just in the moment, the moment is nonlinear. The moment is just the experience of allness or oneness. And as soon as we enter linear time into the equation, then we can see that it's a process. So from the human perspective, the embodiment perspective, everything's being experienced on a linear trajectory. So it's like when you look at it from the human perspective, you see the process. And when you're just in the moment, like Richard said, just this one moment now, only now, then this moment is all there is. So then there's no process here, because this moment's non-linear. It's non-local, yes. It's non-linear. It's just consciousness.
Did I say that?
And even
I don't remember saying that.
I might have filled in a few blanks.
The last time, that was the last time, right? But you know, like, just say this, like, people like, if we say something brilliant, you know, one of you say something brilliant, right? And people just feel like, oh, wow, they can realize a process because they realize something clears out, right? You know, that's what people like, right? And they want to see that process and say something is really happening, and listening to these folks is really doing something for me. And then, I don't know, I mean, is that what people want?
Well, it's what the ego does want to have, and needs encouragement, you know, and so
feedback,
you
like,
know,
right? A feedback,
yes.
You know, like you can see what's happening, you know, this is.
I think one of the things that a counselor or a teacher can do for people is to reframe their negative story into a positive story. And even though it's still a story, that positive story is closer to the truth than the negative story. And so it helps them to relax and let go of their fears and their worries and their negativity that keeps them attached to the thinking mind. And so when you can reframe something in a positive way for someone, then they often can just relax and be and drop into the moment and experience life as not a process. Life
in
as
what
just
sense
as
is
it
it?
is.
In what sense is it more closer to the truth? I mean, I'm not saying it isn't, but let's just go into that a little.
Yes, because life is good.
Oh,
And
really?
so, uh, yeah, well, you see,
Life is good.
the ego or the mind doesn't necessarily experience life as trustworthy and good, but it is. There's benevolence behind it. This oneness is about love
Well, I
and
mean,
good.
already that's a positive story, right? And you're telling a positive
It's a
story right
positive
now, and so
story.
then,
Yeah, and it's closer
and
to the truth.
that's a positive story that can actually help people have a positive story, right? To say that something is good, but
It can
really,
help.
goodness is only the human condition, right? I mean, goodness and badness probably is our judgment, which changes, right? Because
Oh,
one time
I'm not,
the only good Indian was a dead Indian, right? At
well, I'm
least the
not
cowboys used
referring
to
to,
say that.
Richard, I'm not referring to moral goodness like rightness and wrongness, but our essential goodness, our divinity, which is naturally loving and peaceful and naturally acts in the benefit of the whole. And so there's a natural innate goodness that people have and people experience when their mind stops all the worries and the fears and the negativity. When you move out of that mind, which doesn't experience life as good or experience oneself as good, when you move out of all of that, then all there is here is goodness. So being present in the moment, in the now, is not just a blank nothingness. It's there is a love and a peace and a wisdom and a kindness and a sense of unity with all that comes out of the experience of being present and touching into this oneness or divine nature. Divine nature is a loving nature. And you don't have to take my word for it. It's the sages, the religions, everything. It's what everyone wants. Everyone wants goodness. Why do we all want this, want to be loving, want peace, want kindness? Because it is our true nature.
What she said.
Well,
I really feel that way too.
she's saying things like we don't have to take her word for it. There's all kinds of other people we could take their word for it, But what if we don't want to take anyone's word for it? We just want to have
Well,
our
take
own
your,
experience.
Yeah.
and what is your experience? That is exactly what I would point you to, is what is your experience when you are most resting in the present moment? Is it an experience of worry and fear and hatred, or is it an experience of peace, love, and contentment?
Well, see, I would say that maybe that would be a reason to say a positive story is closer to the truth than a negative story, because a positive story would have less anxiety in it, and you can't really say anxiety is anything more than an overlay, and so then I don't know.
Exactly. That's what I'm saying.
Right.
Yeah. So I always say, go towards whatever words or beliefs take you closer to love. That's the right direction. And maybe you don't, if you can drop all your beliefs that interfere with love, then great, do that. But if you can't drop all of your beliefs and all of your thoughts, then at least make some choices about more loving ones, and that will be like the boat that takes you to the divine. So I think there's a place for positive affirmations or healing the negative mind with a certain positivity. That is something we can sort of choose to do, a tool that we have in our toolbox. Now, you don't have to, it is possible for, to just see that all beliefs or all thoughts are useless and just drop them and just stay in the present moment without your thoughts and beliefs. And then you're there in love, and that's the end of the story. But not everybody can do that.
Yeah, really, I find the more that you can drop the concepts and the ideas and just fall back into what you feel, or allow this moment to just be as it is, you can start to fall back into your true nature. And the way that you were describing it, Gina, is very much the way that I experience it. That it's the oneness is like a natural intelligence. There's a momentum within it it's like a perfection, just like the momentum of the earth spinning around the sun. It's like I call it fractal perfection. It sort of looks to me like a fractal where everything's sort of happening, but there's an intelligence to it, to like your cells dividing or a flower opening. And these things are just happening from the perspective of oneness. It's very much perfect. So you're right now moving toward more and more toward that perfection. So and you can't screw it up either. And so I guess like for this whole thing about the process that we were talking about, I think that as long as you're seeking, that what you're saying really, really, really applies to use positivity, or to check and see if the heart is open. All of these things they all help, and they all have their place. And I tend to think of seeking as like having gas in your car. As long as there's gas in your car, it's going to keep running. So a lot of teachers say, to just stop seeking, but I think as long as that energy is still built up inside, that seeking is going to continue happening.
So is seeking like is that the motivation?
I think that's the drive that propels us up the mountain, the drive that is pushing us to experience directly our true nature, and that the oneness and the harmony. It's like an inner push, and at some point, I think that momentum stops, and then you just sort of shift into the state of just being, and there's no more looking for something better, because you just are life. And if you are life, there's nothing else to look for. So you just in the moment, you're just being here.
Yes, I think when teachers say stop the seeking, who they're talking to are people who are frantic about their seeking. I think that when it's time to awaken, seeking naturally arises within us to do whatever we're moved to do. And I think that's fine. And I also think that the seeking can be taken over by the ego, which pushes the seeker to strive towards spirituality in a way that, in fact, inhibits the very thing that the seeker is looking for. And so then the teacher says, stop seeking. But
right. The teacher, sort of like the ego is like continually putting more and more gas in the car when it's already ready to run out.
Right. So
yeah.
I don't think the teacher who says stop seeking is talking to those who are not seeking at all.
Right.
Those who are sitting around not seeking, the teacher would probably say, "How about trying some seeking?" Not really. The teacher would wait until seeking arose within that individual. But in any event, the instruction to not seek is more geared towards someone who is so frantically seeking that they are caught in the ego's fear of not attaining and the ego's grasping of spirituality, and that only prevents someone from the true experience of who they are.
Did either one of you find something by seeking?
For me, seeking definitely had its place. I feel like I needed to go on a little journey. And so all the years that I was seeking, I was deepening in understanding. And I was also acquiring tools that I would later use to help my clients. So I definitely see the value in all of those years of seeking. And the seeking itself didn't help me to shift into being. That just happened when it was ready. but the seeking also had its place in my life and had its purpose. And I mean, I have huge value in looking back at all the years I sat with teachers and everything that I learned. And there was a wisdom that deepened, and that wisdom it's like it's in place now, and it's there to help other people, there to help my clients that come to me now for help with their seeking.
So then is there a way we could kind of really kind of focus in or zero down into that, the statement that seeking itself didn't bring liberation, or however you phrased it? I mean,
right.
Maybe you weren't even there when liberation happened. In other words, you were seeking, and boom, something happened and say, where am I? Where am I? And you didn't see it kind of ease in or slam in or whatever it did. But I mean, can we go closer to that point and see and say something about around there?
Well, I actually experienced a shift. And for me, that experience happened by itself. So it wasn't like I did it or I made it happen. But the way that I see it looking back on it is that there was this momentum that was burning and burning and burning. And eventually it just burnt everything up. Or an analogy I once heard is like a mango that ripens and ripens and ripens, and when it's ripe, it just falls. And so the shift that I experienced, it seemed to just completely happen by itself. So I think it was just the time for it, and it was causeless. It wasn't like I did it or somebody else did it. It just sort of happened like a like a feeling of readiness. And then there was a shift in perception.
So in that way, it wasn't a process, right? I mean, there was something that was a process, or some changes were happening along the way, and then the actual shift was not a. It wasn't shifting a little bit at a time, right? And then a week later,
could I have
more.
Could I have shifted 20 years prior to that? I don't know. In the way that it was experienced, that I don't think that I would have been ready. But I mean, who knows, really?
Yeah.
Because the way that it happened, it did just happen.
In a way, if I look at myself, I could say, well, I could have been ready. Why not? I would have listened to this. But in another way, it never crossed my mind. So in that way, I wasn't ready, you know, like it wasn't on the table as an option, you know, like, hey, you can look over here. And so then, I don't know if you call that readiness or what, you know, but.
I think and is unique too. Everybody goes through these experiences from the angle of their uniqueness. So if somebody else out there is listening and they're wanting to wake up, their awakening isn't going to look like mine did or Gina's. You know, it's going to be their own unique experience.
Yeah, right. But it's probably not going to look like they're seeking either.
It could, though. You never know.
my experience about seeking is exactly the same as yours, Christine. That I feel that something within me motivated me to do the healing work, to do the studying, the reading, the attending of satsang, and all the things that I did. I feel that for some reason I must have needed that, or that prepared the ground. It seemed to me that it was necessary for me. I don't know for sure, but why was I motivated to do those things if it wasn't necessary for this particular individual to do that? So I think that seeking prepared the ground for just for that readiness to happen. And you know, there are plenty of people out there who aren't seeking, and that's the right experience for them to not be seeking. It's not time for them. But I think that those of us, most of us, now this isn't altogether true, but most people who've had an awakening have been seekers. And if you've been a seeker and you've done the kind of healing and clearing work, then it's my experience that when you do awaken, it tends to stick more, because there are a lot of people who have awakenings who seem to fall right back into the egoic identification, because some of their conditioning is so strong that even though they've seen the truth, they go back to living almost as if they never had that awakening. And so I do feel that healing our conditioning to a point where it isn't so compelling is necessary before awakening and after awakening. I think it's part of our evolution as human beings to become clearer emotionally so that we can be a clearer instrument. And, now it doesn't apply to everyone, but I do think that for many people, it's necessary to do some psychological work, some emotional work, some healing work, some study, and all of that in order to clear out the unconscious complexes that make thoughts very compelling. Because when people have been abused or had a difficult childhood, they have a lot of negativity in their mind and a certain compellingness to their thoughts. So if someone like that manages to have an awakening, it might not really be that, their realization may not stick or be that deep because their mind still remains very compelling.
That's very interesting that you say like it's not 100%, but I mean a lot of people that have had awakening experiences have been seekers, and then
Yes.
Of course we hear a lot of stories, enough stories about people that had the same experiences as in childhood from early on, and some of them kind of caught on that what they're feeding me is not really the way it is, and some of them didn't know what to make of it because it's really not in the mythology. We don't really say that there'll be sometime everything can seem to collapse, and what's left is probably very true, and the basis of everything else that we build. So without that mythology, there's no recognition. So then we could say that seekers would have the recognition because they've already read about these things. And I don't know, is that kind of, how do you like that?
Well, for me, I definitely had an awakening experience when I was 6. And at the time, I had no context for any of it. I just didn't know what Christine was. And I didn't know what anything was. And I was just in that space of the unconditioned mind. And that experience of identification with consciousness rather than a person. And so the experience was very direct. But I had no idea what that was. I had no language for it. I had no file to put that in. So later in my seeking years, when I would read stories, I'd be like, oh, well, I had that when I was 6. I know what they're talking about. So I think everybody will have their own different experiences. Like for me, there was actually several awakenings that happened over the course of my entire life before the last one that became sort of more permanent. So for me, it was like Gina described, I would kind of go back into the conditioning, and then there would be another shift, and then I go back into the conditioning, and then there would be seeking, and so then I would start to seek, and then I would, during my seeking years, I was reading the stories of the masters and the Yoga Sutras and the Upanishads and all the holy books, and every time I would read a story about a master's experience, it would sort of cue me back to my own direct experiences. So for me, I always found like the resonation was the highest when a master was sharing their direct experience rather than, an instruction. The instructions always sort of fell short with me, but when somebody was sort of writing about a heartfelt sharing of a direct experience, and they were just articulating, this is how it was, and this is how it felt, and it was like this, and it was like that. I could really feel it in my bones. I could feel it in my cells because there had been a direct taste for me in various points of my life. So for me, that's how I like to share. I like to, when I do my writing, I like to just sort of like share diary entries. I'll just go into articulating the inner space and just sharing it, just because that's what always resonated for me. but everything has its place and everything has a value.
So that's why for you, it's you can relate to a process, because there was a long time when you kind of really understood it, right? And
Yeah.
maybe you didn't understand the door to go in and out, but you knew, you could feel with every sharing of a direct process that you could relate and say, sure, I know that place, I know that space.
It was almost like a steeping, or like I've heard teachers use the word marinating, and that's almost exactly the way that it felt, was that throughout the seeking years, there was this steeping, because it would resonate with my own direct experience. And then I would be able to settle down into that and to just kind of rest in that. And so it was like a deepening and a deepening. All the years of the seeking were beneficial for me. Each teacher would share, and they would sit up on the satsang couch, and they would share their experience, and I would resonate with my own experience, and it helped me to kind of eventually deepen enough into that I shifted. But again, when the shift happened, it did happen by itself.
So in other words, if there was a mythology, or if there were fairy tales that were actually, and there are in a way, because we can look at them and we don't interpret them that way, but if that was something that could help a child recognize something that's happening to them, then maybe seeking would never happen. Well, not never, but I mean, it wouldn't happen so often.
Well, there's nothing wrong with seeking. It's almost like you're implying that it would be better if people didn't have to seek. But this oneness that we are does it all sorts of ways within each individual. And I think the process that you're talking about is a process of integration of one's realization. And there is an unfolding of depth of one's realization, and there also is a deepening of the integration of one's realization, or the embodiment of that, being able to live that. And I think that what I was talking about in terms of people who haven't maybe gotten healed adequately enough, they may have a realization, but they may not be able to integrate that and live their realization, embody it, express who they are, because there's still clutter in their unconscious that needs to be cleared away. So I think the process is a process not only of deepening realization that is different for everyone, but also a deepening of the integration and embodiment of that realization. And the timing of all of that is unique. And it is the way it is for each person, because that's how it's meant to be for that person. And it doesn't need to be any differently. It's not that someone should have unfolded more quickly, or without seeking, or with seeking, or anything. It's perfect however they're doing it. And I think that's one of the things that I would want people to understand, is that whatever experience they're having, as far as their spiritual unfolding goes, is exactly the right experience for them.
I don't think I'm directly against seeking, or I mean, how could I be? Because it just is what it is. But I could propose that maybe it's not all that effective, because most people, I think, share that they didn't really open from a seeking; they opened from a surprise. It was a total surprise, actually, what happened, and so then somehow we look at that and say, well, a surprise didn't happen to me, and we're trying to transform it into an event, right? But anyhow, there is some kind of a surprise factor there, but yet so many people are saying that, seek harder, seek as hard as you can, seek with all your might, this is the only way that you're going to turn your face in the right direction, is to have this this holy angst, and I mean, I really don't agree with that. I really don't agree with that at all, and I actually don't agree with all that any kind of human judgments that something's perfect, that something's just right for you. I mean, all these are kind of backstories that just try to what's the point of all those stories? Like, I mean, the point might be just to not have anxiety that, oh, I spent all my life doing it the wrong way. Of course,
that's the point.
Oh, that's the
Yes.
point, right?
That's the point. Yeah. The point is, the point is saying that to people who are suffering over their mistaken belief that it should be different. It should look different for me. I'm failing at this. I'm not unfolding. I'll never awaken. There's so many seekers out there who are suffering so much about not awakening or not having an awakening that looked like
but
someone.
Awakening doesn't have anything to do with your memory of how yesterday was. What does it have to do with yesterday? Zero, And you could just say that without saying yesterday was perfect. I mean, just say, look, anything you're thinking about, anything you remember, anything you did, all your long, long trail has nothing to do with whatever we're talking about. We're just saying, drop all that stuff, take all that garbage and toss it in the can,
Yeah,
that's really,
way of saying it.
Aren't we saying
Sure.
that?
Sure, you can say it that way. And
so, because if you say it's all perfect, I mean, then you're actually, aren't you reinforcing it and saying, oh gosh, I'm glad I came through all this stuff because here I am now. You're still hooked in solid. The linkage is not broken whatsoever. I don't know. I don't that's my deal, I guess.
I think it's sort of like the difference between awakening and integrating that awakening back into life. So if you're talking about like the actual awakened state, or that sort of like nothingness state where there's no beliefs, I call it the unconditioned mind, and it's just empty, and it's just presence, and it's just here-ness, and there's nothing there, and that's like, say that's the awakened state, but at some point, even if you've seeked and seeked and seeked and then you have an awakening, after that you still need to go back into life. And you need to embody back into the human experience. So I think it depends on if we're talking to a person who hasn't had an awakening, that hasn't had a shift in consciousness, or they haven't had a shift in perspective, then I would use different words to talk to somebody who hasn't shifted yet. But to talk to somebody who already has had an awakening, it's like, okay, well now we talk about the integrating in the human piece, because otherwise we would just stay checked out in this state of empty nothingness, and none of that deep unconscious stuff would ever get processed. So I think the beauty is in actually going through a process and landing back down in the human experience and integrating the unconscious, having the unconscious become conscious, and be a full human being and just be awake to the human experience. So, and then it's
say a little bit more about that deep unconscious stuff that needs to be processed.
I think sort of like in the deep unconscious, we have maybe patterns, beliefs, ideas, and we're not conscious of them. So we don't know that they're there, but they run us. So they're maybe a fear-based thought system or a fear-based belief, but as long as we're unconscious of it, we don't know that we're doing it. And so when a shift happens, all of a sudden you start to see the unconscious stuff, and you can take that opportunity to land down in the unconscious and let it become conscious. And so you can actually go into your deep fears, you can go into your old beliefs and reevaluate them and look at them from a perspective of pure consciousness. It's like, do I still want to hold on to that notion? Is that really true for me anymore? And you can just start to really reevaluate it. At least that's how it was for me. And this was all after the shift too. This was the sort of post-awakening integrating.
Yeah.
And I think it's really important because that's the embodiment part. That's where we can become a full awake human being, and we can really go into, okay, well, what does it even mean to be a human? Now that I'm awake and I'm consciousness and it's impersonal and I'm a human. Oh my gosh, this is such a great gift. Now I can actually be awake to my humanity. So it flips around.
It's kind of amazing that we can wake up and still all our old unconscious stories are still operating, you know. And it's kind of like,
yeah, and once they're conscious, then you have choice about what you want to do with that. It's when they're unconscious that you don't have any choice. If they're unconscious, you don't know that they're there, then they run you. And if you're yeah.
I'm sorry. It's much easier from that awake place to see the truth about your thoughts and your emotion, any emotions that are created. It's much easier. You already have the distance, a certain perspective that allows you to relate to your thoughts and not get pulled into them. And that's what heals any negative thoughts or beliefs that are unhelpful. You can see them clearly for what they are. Whereas before awakening, it was hard to see them. You believed them. You still believed them. You were identified with them. They convinced you. But after awakening, those same thoughts and beliefs come up, but it's really obvious that you have a choice of whether to go back into them or not. And from that awake place, you usually choose to recognize that they have no value for you to believe. And so you can heal the conditioning really quickly after awakening, much more effectively and quickly than you could before awakening. And that's part of the grace and wonder and beauty of awakeness, is that it allows you a much bigger distance from all of that conditioning, and it's easy to see it for what it is. And it's easy to see other people's conditioning for what it is. So it makes it easier for you to help others out of their entanglement with their beliefs and their fears and negative stories.
Maybe many of those thoughts that you say that you see from clarity are about me and my suffering. So they're thoughts that have an origin in separation and the importance of things that happen to this separate being. And
yes.
Maybe they can be diffused kind of easy by kind of letting go of them. But still, there's a whole other group of thoughts that have to do with planet Earth and the population. And they're actually suffering too. And probably they're suffering because people are really wringing their blood out, you know. People are really have their thumb on, you know, there's a lot of thumbs on a hell of a lot of people that just are pressing down. And somehow I feel spirituality denies that and is not really very effective with that, you know. They just believe that hocus pocus, if I have a pure thought or go to the stillness, God is good just because you said so, you know. You said that the essential nature of the world is good, and goodness will come when I somehow let go. But I think that goodness also has to come by maybe some action, you know. Somebody has to say, well, take your thumb off those people.
I'm glad you're bringing that up, because I'm not one of those people who just thinks, you know, just meditate in your little corner and let the world go by. When you are in touch with this awakeness, or what I call essence, moves you in the world to do whatever your part in the whole is. Some people's part is to take very clear political action. I feel that my part is to help people awaken and move them out of suffering and help them align with their plan so that they play their role in the whole. So everyone has a role to play, and you can only discover what action to take by being aligned with this awakeness, not by being aligned with your mind, with your ego, with your egoic mind. Your egoic mind doesn't know what your role in the whole is. And it's likely to take you into certain actions that might even undermine what the 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 greater plan that's unfolding here on Earth. You may not even agree that there is a greater plan unfolding on Earth, but I feel that we're all here for a purpose.
Yeah.
And that we're all playing a part in the unfolding of the evolution of ourselves and of the Earth, and perhaps, you know, the entire universe, the oneness, and all of that. And we know what our part is by following our joy, by allowing this essence, this awakeness, to motivate us to draw we find our place by following our heart, by following our motivation, our God-given drives, not our ego drives, but the more divinely inspired drives within us. But we can only recognize those drives if we're not so caught up in the made-up reality of our mind. And so that's why it's so important for people to wake up, to not follow the egoic mind, and to get in touch with the real, true drives within them, because everyone has a role to play in the evolution of this planet. And you'll discover it by aligning with that which you truly are.
I actually think this is really important too, that particularly the part about the suffering on the planet, like the people who are, like Richard's analogy of the thumbs pushing down on the people. And I think this is where the benefit for me in the seeking comes from, the benefit in actually doing spiritual work. In for me personally, walking through my deepest pains and walking through things like heartbreak, and being willing to really look at the whatever might still be unconscious. It just takes a little bit of willingness to just look at it, and to really, really honestly look at it and walk through it. And now for me, what I find is that I'm a lot more willing to sit with somebody who's suffering. It's like I was saying about the mountain. I'm willing to come right down to the bottom of the mountain to where they are, because I've walked through my own pain. And so I don't feel the sense that I need to fix them, or I need to change them, or I need to heal them. I just come right down to where they're at, and I just sit with them, knowing that they can unravel that themselves. And especially if somebody's holding them and supporting them, they have that extra oomph to unravel their own pain. And so for me, that's why I think that the integration work is so important, because then you're not projecting onto other people's suffering, and you're not projecting your own pain that you haven't faced onto other people, but you're willing to actually go in there with them because you've done your own work. So you're sort of clear to go in, to walk into their suffering with them and just hold it with them. And I think to me that offers them the support so that they can unravel that. And like Gina was talking about the thoughts, you can just kind of shift into a different kind of thinking and unravel that energetic, the energetic stuckness that's also part of the suffering. They have the room to unravel that. So I think it's really important to do the seeking and to do the work also for that reason too. Gives you that experience.
I want to ask if there isn't a danger, because of course it's cool if there's a lot of clarity here and I can see what to do, right? But if I have to say that you could probably, putting your hands into the mix too early is going to be counterproductive, you know, and maybe you're working against the greater good or something like that. And I would have to say that in my vision, I think that we're all working against the greater good right now, every one of us, you know. And the idea to say wait is kind of like you're encouraging stasis and saying back off, you know, and wait for what? Because, like, I mean, not very many people admit that I'm awakened now, you know, or like, so then when is it my time to put my hands in or do something, or when is it my time to just
well, I think that if you have the question about it, like if you don't have that sense of knowing that it's important to have a guide, or it's at least helpful to have a guide, to somebody who's very awake and present and can just meet you where you're at, and they can see from their vantage point to sort of point out if it is a good idea for you to get your hands dirty in this moment, or if it's a better idea to sort of shift you out of that and into a space of maybe impersonal consciousness. So it's because each moment is unique, and each person is unique, and each situation is unique. But for me, what I find is that presence always knows. It always knows exactly how to meet. It knows exactly how to meet a reaction. It knows how to meet a response. It knows how to meet a situation or a person. So if presence isn't there, then, to have a guide I think is hugely beneficial, because then at least you have access to presence via this other person, and they can point out to you.
It just seems like in our world, stasis is so abundant. Everybody's stuck. Like, okay, look at, we have the lowest, election turnouts. That's stasis, right? We have all kinds of numbing things, like different kind of activities that numb you, including drugs and alcohol and overeating and, obesity and which produces obesity, in other words, and how many things how many of us are really numbed, and all the kind of gossip about celebrities and all the conspiracy theories and stuff are all kind of really numbing us from what's going on. And so then that is so super abundant to counsel anything that, like saying, counsel against numbness maybe, and talk about what could bring right activity.
Awakeness is kind of the opposite of escapism, because awakeness is about meeting what's here and looking at it with honesty and presence. So, if you are numbing out, then true or genuine awakeness, it's going to face that, and it's going to face the numbing, and it's also going to face what's underneath that, the reason that you're numbing, which could be some kind of thing in the unconscious that you don't want to deal with, or you don't want to walk through or face. So the awakeness, the presence, actually takes you right into it. It doesn't move you away from it, which is what the numbing behaviors would. They're sort of more avoidances. But presence is going to actually move you right into it, whatever it is that you're avoiding. Go ahead, Gina. I can see you have something to say.
Well, I just want, our world is definitely in trouble, and I want to include the whole picture, Richard, because you, for instance, are someone who's doing what I think is your life purpose and creating these videos, helping to bring awareness and understanding to a lot of people. And I think that there are so many people like yourself who are using the internet, who are using technology, and that the force that is possible from coming together using the internet, and what we're seeing is there's a certain coming together of people who are in a minority. You could say, people who care about the planet in a certain way that we do, and who are awake, have been in the minority. But if they can come together through these various venues, and particularly the internet and all this access to video, to talks, that multiplies this movement so much. And I think there's a powerful movement afoot that can shift things and can change things. So I think a lot of people are finding the momentum within themselves to move in a direction that can turn things around. And so I feel hopeful in the face of a lot of problems that we do see. And, sometimes it doesn't even take great numbers of people. It just takes the right message at the right time, or the right person in the right place can sometimes, activate, thousands and hundreds of thousands of people who were formerly inactive. You even see this with the Occupy Wall Street movement. So it just takes a few brave souls to stand out, and then the other ones who've been afraid but who feel the same way, they begin to join in, and all of a sudden we've got more voices for positive change and action than you ever imagined. So I think it's happening.
Yeah.
I like to
it
be
does
positive.
kind of it could okay, let's just say this, I'll just say it this way, like, we're friends, right? We've all talked before,
Yes.
the three of us. So then I might be playing the part of a contrarian now. So whatever you guys say, I'm going to squash it down, slap it around.
Yeah.
But, I mean, why should we have let's try to discover something, and let's try it without any preconceptions or anyhow ideas that we need this or we need that. And so then there's that. It's true that a few brave souls, the world takes a few brave souls, because, I mean, for how many years have maybe the three of us been dissatisfied about this or that or the other, but, what can we do? We'll just say, well, see what happens. And either one of us were going to go out on the corner and turn a plastic bucket over and start beating on it and say, holding up a sign,
That's
stop
somebody else's
numbness,
job.
stop numbness,
I was just going to say that, Gina.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's somebody else's job to stand on the street corner and drum that drum. So see, it's okay if we all just do our piece, because there are enough of us. And it wouldn't work if all of us did the same thing. We all have our place in the machinery of the evolution of this planet. And it's okay for us to just do, our part. But, we do need to do our part. And there are things that can interfere with doing our part. And that's fear, mostly, and our conditioning that says, oh, what will people think? Or I shouldn't do this, or how will I make money if I follow my heart, or all those kinds of stopping sorts of thoughts. So, we have to be brave in these times to follow our heart. It takes courage to follow your heart and to find what it is that is your contribution to the world. And it might not look like a political activist, but it might be exactly what the world needs in order for the political activists to do their part.
Well, what I'm referring to is actually the few brave souls, when they hold the space, when they're doing their occupying on the street corner or the plaza or wherever. Actually, it's pretty easy to go out there and speak with them and be a part of it. And I've done it maybe 8 times, gone out to the Occupy Chicago, and it's been maybe one of the biggest openings and realizations that I've had. And the last time I went, I couldn't find them. They kind of closed down, or they got swept away, or something like that, or I don't know where they were. And I could really feel the difference. The city of Chicago was back as it was 40 years ago, into kind of like an isolated, separated, consumer type, judgmental, but I knew the truth of it now, because I had broken through. And so then it didn't really sweep me back that far, but I could just see the pity of it. Just the fact that those people were standing there somehow made a connection with everybody in the city possible. And I tried it, like I talked to 3 to 5 people a day, just out of the blue. And sometimes I get going for an hour and a half with them. I mean, it's an amazing possibility that we live in.
Yeah. So in doing that, you're doing what you're moved to do in this part, and who knows where that might lead, if anywhere, or how you affect the whole in doing what you're doing. But I do feel that if we are true to our authentic self, if we're true to that movement within us, our heart, that moves us to act in the world, that's the best we can do. There's only so much we can do about other people's hearts, other people's choices, but we can be really clear about what we're doing in the world, and our impact of our thoughts and our words and our actions in the world. And so, I feel my piece has always been to be more around helping people with their consciousness, with getting free on the inside. And then there are other people who are helping free the world in other ways. But it seems really essential for everyone to get in touch with their essential self. And you don't have to have an awakening to know what your heart or your essential self is moving you to do in a particular moment. You just have to be present in the moment to know what your heart, what essence, what the oneness, how it wants to use you in that moment. And that is our work. That's all we need to do.
Yeah, I really find it it comes around to what we were talking about at the very beginning about stuffing yourself into a mold and thinking I should be this way. And if I'm this way, then I will impact humanity and I'll make a change. But the reality of it is that if you let go of all the shoulds and you just emerge as yourself, as your authentic self, you have access to presence, which embedded within presence is a natural intelligence, which knows exactly what to do. And then everybody is playing their part, their unique role in the totality. And so the resistance is what blocks the presence, or the fears. I say resistance. So if you're resisting what is by holding on to what should be, then you're going to block that presence from being able to emerge through you as you are. So by just letting go of all the shoulds, letting go of all the beliefs, like we were talking about earlier, and just letting yourself be exactly as you are, that allowing is going to give you full access to the present. So you can meet this moment and you can play your part. And then, I mean, to me, I do see it as perfect, but then it's unfolding, and that presence is going to meet the situation. So like, Richard, you're going to do your part by following your heart and meeting the people one-on-one on Occupy. And I'm going to teach yoga classes and Gina's going to meet her clients, so we all have our own way to contribute, and it's totally unique.
Somehow we talked about that some story can be running. You can really see you can be a clear person, but some story is still running. And we talked about the need for integration. And in other words, appearances don't change, is what we said. It doesn't necessarily change. But somehow I feel like what you see is what you get. And a clarity has to reflect outside in the manifest world. And if it doesn't, it's a false clarity. It's just a delusion. And so I don't know, what do you think of that?
Or it's just unfinished. Oh, yeah? Well, it might just be unfinished. It's just not fully cooked. That's what I would say about it. That, some people's realization is not integrated enough to be embodied yet. But it will be someday. It's getting there, everyone's evolving. And by perfect, I would just like to say more what I mean. It's a word, I would use that phrase with someone who felt that it wasn't perfect as a counteracting to that. But really what I mean is it's perfectly as it is. As a way of just seeing that the only sane choice is to accept the way things are. And so things are perfect as they are because they are. And so that's, really all I mean about perfect.
I kind of like that. I can say perfect and all that up and I can say illusion and all that stuff when I'm talking about, what's interior to me. And my suffering is perfect, and my, I'm allowed to say that. My disease is perfect, and my, my stroke is perfect, or whatever happened to me, or, my awareness out of whatever happened to me is perfect. But there's such a strong tendency or possibility to say, well, let's extrapolate that and say that their suffering is perfect for them. And that is really, really mean-spirited, you know, because so much terrible. We live so insulated, you know. You can't believe how insulated we are. We don't really know, and we don't hear any truth. You know, there's really no truth in except maybe on the internet, you know. And then you have to kind of wade through it and figure out what it is. You could find people just telling their own story, and it must be true because I mean, why should they? You know, they.
This is where, to me, compassion comes in to the equation. Like if you're truth without compassion, you know, can be just mean. So it's having that heart open to be able to meet somebody in compassion. If compassion probably wouldn't say to somebody who's deeply suffering that your suffering is perfect for you. Compassion would probably just want to hold them like a mother holds a crying baby. So it's sort of, you know, to incorporate that aspect of compassion into the equation, I think is really important too. And that's
so just saying perfect or just right for them, you can't really say that. All you can say is just right for me, you know, but just right for them is a very mean-spirited thing to say, you know. If you really look around and see what's happening.
Whatever was right for the moment. So if I was meeting a person in presence and they were suffering, presence would come through with compassion. And the words that would come out probably wouldn't be, oh, your suffering is so perfect.
One of the problems with taking a spiritual idea like it's all perfect is that it becomes an idea, and then to apply it to something and to pull it out under a certain circumstance and say, oh, well, it's all perfect. That is a distortion of the truth. It's a misuse of the truth. So yes, you know, a statement like that, like Christine said, has to come out of the moment. It has to come out of you know, the moment. In that moment, it would be appropriate if it came out of presence. But if it comes out of ego from the idea that everything is perfect, well, then it can be cruel and really not the thing to say that to help somebody.
What about only staying with compassion and forget about perfection or just rightness, and just say that, you know, I mean, I'm just going to relate to the world, but in a compassionate way, and to me, everybody's heart is my little kitty or my little baby, you know, that I'm going to caress their heart and my own heart too, especially mine, you know, and I'm going to just love myself like I would an infant.
Self-love and self-forgiveness and self-acceptance are hugely important, because then you can mirror that to others. But I think there are times where compassion would say, like if I was working with a teenage client and they had an eating disorder because they thought they were overweight, it would probably be appropriate for me to tell that teenage female that she is perfect the way she is. So there are some cases where it's totally appropriate to use the term perfect. And I think Gina hit the nail on the head with the word appropriate. It's about appropriateness. And that's what presence has, is that it can meet the person with such openness and such availability that the appropriate words have room to come out and meet them to what they need to hear.
And they will naturally be compassionate.
Yeah, and they will naturally be, definitely.
Things change so fast, and it's just always going faster and faster and faster. And I'm not so sure if our spiritual teachings have kept up with the times, or if they've actually accelerated very much at all. And I have this feeling, I don't know, maybe I'll run it by both of you and see what you think, but I don't know, I think in a couple of years you won't even recognize this teaching. It'll be so changed, and it'll actually become what I call relevant. It'll either become relevant or it'll just be out of the picture. I don't know. What do you think?
I think it'll shapeshift. It'll morph. If it's coming from presence, it's going to meet the times appropriately. So it might come through in a completely different language set, but it'll still have that essence behind it. So, you know, it'll probably be and maybe it'll be spoken in a completely different way, and maybe it'll be unnecessary to even speak it. But if it's presence, then it's going to fit itself perfectly into the situation or the events.
Yeah, everything evolves, everything changes. So who knows? Who knows how it will evolve? But it's probably pretty likely that it will evolve. I don't know about disappearing or changing so much that it's not recognizable. We don't know. Who knows? That's what's fun about life. You just don't know.
It's sort of like a chameleon. It'll probably just take on whatever color the world is, and
in other words, if it comes from presence, it'll appear in the way it's needed. But I mean, has it appeared the way it's needed so far, or maybe it hasn't? I don't know. I mean, a lot of people think that they can escape. A lot of people think they can escape life, you know, by staying in some kind of silence. And a lot of people are basing this teaching on solely a personal suffering, and the way to get rid of that personal suffering is just kind of like move aside from it. And so then that's so easy to extrapolate to world suffering, and just move aside from it. And that's what we've done, I think, over the last 40 years, maybe, you know. Or longer.
That's definitely not my message.
Yeah, Christine and I are on the same page on this one. Yeah, we both feel very strongly that the oneness is alive in us, and that this is a purposeful life, and we each have a purpose, and we're here to express that oneness in our unique individuated form. Right, Christine?
Absolutely. And the problem with stepping away from it is then you're trying to hit a state and maintain it, and it becomes detached. So the perspective, like coming into the totality and being fully in the moment as you are, to me, it's a different approach. It's not stepping aside, it's stepping into, like right into whatever's here and meeting it with presence. And if there's a lot of resistance, then it's harder to access presence. So what Gina's saying is really relevant about healing those conditioned beliefs that hold you in resistance, so that you can be more just accepting of this moment just is what it is. And as I sit here and I allow this moment to be as it is, then I have full access to presence, and then it can meet you. And
life is very exciting and alive from that place, because you don't know exactly. I don't know what I'm going to say. You don't know exactly what's going to happen next, and you're just allowing yourself to be an instrument, a mouthpiece, an actor for presence, for this individuated oneness that you are, and who knows what it'll do next.
So unpredictable.
But it's fun. It's fun that way. It's really fun. And you can trust this individuated oneness, because at its depth, it acts lovingly, compassionately. It acts in a way that benefits the whole. So you can trust yourself when you are aligned and in this place. It's a trustworthy place. It's a place that speaks wisdom and goodness and love and peace, and that's what everyone wants. That's what the world needs. Richard, you're smiling so much. Are you with me? Are you with me on that?
No, I don't go with any of that stuff. All those presumptions are just flowing like a river. And the relevancy of this teaching, I don't know. I better stand up and salute, or otherwise I don't know what it's good for. But maybe it is. I don't know. Oh boy.
So that quieted you down, huh, Richard?
Well, there's a freedom here, you know. You can find an interior freedom, and so then somehow with that freedom, there should be a lot of effectiveness, whatever that would mean, and wherever that would turn to, and
Exactly.
and to withhold that effectiveness from your brothers and sisters, from your fellow planetary inhabitants, it would seem to be a pity, you know. And then to talk about that freedom, even like you said, Gina, and just help people kind of find clarity, and that's a freedom for their effectiveness, and whatever effectiveness should mean in this moment, and that's where the appropriateness comes. And I don't know, I guess that's what I feel.
Sounds good.
All right, I guess we solved the world's problems this time, right?
I hope so.
It's all about freedom.
I guess I don't know if I don't think I really feel urgent, but you know, I feel like now's a good time for me to get up and do it.
Yeah, sometimes it's more appropriate to just act without even talking about it.
Right.
And also recognize, Richard, that you're already doing a great service that nobody else is doing just like you. And you were doing it a long time ago too.
No kidding.
That's not nothing. Yeah.
I can tell you the times actually I'm like the first guy that put spiritual movies on YouTube. And one of the very first ones was Nirmala.
Yes.
You're a pioneer.
Yeah. And that's amazing. I don't know, but I don't really take credit for what's going on today, but someone else would have been the first one if it wasn't me. But I kind of know that, but anyhow.
Yeah, so you're unfolding perfectly, Richard.
You're the perfect Richard.
All right. I'm fighting perfection all the time. I'm going to have to give up.
Yay!
Well, I hope we said something good. I think we had a good time at it anyhow, you know, trying to see what we could get out of each other. Thanks so much. Thank you, Christine. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard.
Thank you, Gina Lake.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Thank you, Richard. Wonderful talking with you.
I always thank everybody else too that's just watching, you know. Just keep watching or watch one more time or something like that. And write some comments too, because we're not so sure what you're thinking, you know. And since you're not here, we missed out on your view of it. So then tell us what's going on. So thanks a lot and goodbye.